We've all heard too much bad karaoke. Good evening. My name is Susan Demers. It's my pleasure to welcome you here this evening. This is, a homegrown program on a super important topic. So on behalf of the Institute for Strategic Policy Solutions, welcome. And thank you, Senator Brandes, for joining us. And what we're going to do here in just a moment is I'm going to introduce you to our panelists. But before we do that, just to show you that we have some actual buy-in from our local community as we do this, I want to sort of put a nod to our, I guess I would call it dignitaries. Although I'm starting with my old friend Jim Oliver, who is the vice mayor of the city of Seminole, and well, he's a dignitary. We also have Councilor Tom Christie and Trish Springer. From Largo, we have City Commissioner Jamie Robinson, who is also serving right now as the president of the Suncoast League of Cities. And with that, I want to just start us off by thanking our event partners this evening. The City of Seminole, the Florida League of Cities, and the Seminole Chamber of Commerce. So we have two segments to this. We'll start with a series of questions that I have been prepped to ask of our panel, and we'll go down the line. And then we'll take questions from our in-person audience, and we have a virtual audience as well. So if you would like to submit a question, I think we've got the instructions on the screen, and we will show that again, just in case. So this is your heads up, but you may hear some things that spark inquiry as you listen to this. So feel free to text during the first part of the discussion, but we'll take a little break. And when we take that little break, I'll hand it off to my boss, our Vice President of Academic Affairs, Matthew Leo Troth, and he will moderate the questions from the audience. So with that, I just have to say that this whole program is the brainchild of Seminole Vice Manager Jim Oliver, who really wanted to give our community a way to be more involved in the legislative process. In this session, the legislature will allocate $100 billion and will change laws that affect the 22 million Floridians and all of our cities and businesses contained within the state of Florida. That's a pretty big swath of influence for just a few weeks at the beginning of the year. We hope that you come away from this evening's performance, information session, show with some ideas about how you could positively affect the direction of our state and the way we spend those billions of dollars. So with that, I want to introduce you to our panel. First, we have Senator Jeff Brandes, who is a lifelong resident of St. Petersburg. He's a veteran, a local businessman, and after serving in the Army from 1999 to 2006, he joined his grandfather in their family lumber business. He was first elected to the Florida House of Representatives in 2010. He was elected to the Florida Senate in 2012 and re-elected 2014, 2016, 2018. So I want to also introduce Scott Dudley, who is here with me, and we will have a third panelist who will fly in just a little bit. But before I give you the details on Mr. Dudley and his career, I just wanted Senator Brandes to explain to you how he got involved in government.
Happy to. I grew up in St. Petersburg, Florida. I was born in downtown St. Pete at Bayfront and went to Northside Christian School from kindergarten through 12th grade. My mom was the first teacher ever hired there. She ultimately became the elementary school principal and then the headmaster of the school. I joined the Army 7 days after high school, mostly to get away from her. I spent 11 years in the military, and then I was in Iraq in 2003, 2004 with 101st. And then while I was in Iraq, I read a book called Capitalism and Freedom by Milton Friedman and realized I was a libertarian. Came back and working for my family business, which they promptly sold. And then I stayed on with the family for a couple of years, handling just the transaction and the post-transaction activities. Ran for the Florida House in 2010, won by just under 1,000 votes for the Senate in 2012. And then 14, 16, and 18 again ran. So I'm pretty heavily vetted. I tend to work on some of the more challenging policy issues. I would say our team is probably the best in the country on transportation. We're up there on property insurance in the state of Florida, probably one of the top 2 or 3 legislators in the state of Florida on property insurance. We do a little bit of work on affordable housing and a lot of work on criminal justice reform. But happy to talk about any issues you'd like to tonight.
Great. Thank you so much. I want to introduce you to our second panelist. This is Scott Dudley. He is the Director of Field Advocacy and Federal Affairs at the Florida League of Cities. He's worked there for more than 19 years. He oversees the grassroots and member advocacy efforts at the state and federal level for Florida's 411 municipalities. He is the proud father of 3 sons, ages 39, 36, 35, and he has 2 grandchildren. A beautiful 14-year-old granddaughter and an extremely active 8-year-old grandson. So Scott, would you tell us how you came to be involved in government?
Great. So thank you. And Senator Brandes, thanks for participating tonight. It's good to see you. It's funny, you're in Tallahassee and I'm here in your area, and we'll cross each other on I-10 or I-275 sure, as we flip back and forth. But thanks for your participation. So I come from a big family. We sat down at the dinner table and talked politics. I remember in 6th grade, I did a report on Watergate. What did you do this summer? And I turned in a report on Watergate. My teacher said, okay, that's an odd thing to do for the summer. But I've just always been really engaged. My family has always been one of those families we just talk politics. I worked went to Tallahassee to go to college and been there ever since and been in the political process. It's the only job I've ever had in terms of it being in the political process, so I literally have no other marketable skill. But I love it. It's contagious. It's all consuming, and I really love being part of the political process. So, great. Thanks for having me here tonight.
Thank you so much. Well, I just want to give you a heads up that our third panelist, who will be flying in to join us a bit later, is Michelle Grimsley, who is from Manatee County, and she herself has served as a legislative aide. But right now, she is part of an advocacy group. I think we commonly call that lobbyists. And she represents a wide range of different things. So you see, we have 3 different points of view. We have a legislator. We have someone who represents the political subdivisions of the state of Florida in the various, in the state legislature and in Washington. And then we have someone who has formerly worked in the legislative process, but is now working on the advocacy side. And I know that Dr. Oliver's main intention was to help us all understand effective advocacy and how we can get our needs expressed to our legislators. And so with that, I'm just gonna sort of take the big question, and it will be different because each one of these people is from a slightly different point of view, right? So Senator Brandes just told us, gave you the broad scope of the ideas that he's been working on, but what would you say is at the top of your personal agenda, Senator Brandes, this session?
Let's see. We're at the point in session where most of the bills are dead, and so we have to talk about what's remaining. And what's remaining really are probably the top one I have is my passion for criminal justice reform. Just to kind of give you some context of what the criminal justice system looks like in Florida. Florida has about 85% of our prisons are not air conditioned. We have about 80,000 inmates. We're half of my inmates can't read at the sixth grade level. So 40,000 of my 80,000 can't read at the sixth grade level. We offer basically no education in the prison system. Maybe have one or two teachers at most facilities, but most facilities have 1,500 to 2,000 inmates. And so one of my top priorities this year is to radically enhance education in the prison system by using Florida Virtual School and allowing for high school diplomas in the prison system.
That's a great goal, but I will say that I regularly receive missives from prisoners in the Florida prison system, and they don't have access to technology. So they're always looking for a correspondence course. So that's
Right.
that's a big bridge to cross over for a lot of people, that technological bridge. And that's just as true for us, in a community college as it is for those people there inside the prison system. So, Scott, what are the big issues that you are working on this session?
So first of all, I just want to commend Senator Brandes, because it's actually one of those issues that he's taking on is one that is the League of Cities. It's not our issue, but it's certainly important for the betterment of the state overall, and we deal mostly with the operations and functions, legislation that deals with the operations and functions of municipalities. But one of the important things about Senator Brandes taking on the issue that he is that sometimes you have to, you have to have the right messenger. And Senator Brandes is indeed the right messenger on that by being a Republican, he's certainly brandished his credentials in that field and is considered the expert on it. And so him taking something like that on there's probably maybe just a few other people in the legislature that could actually be credentialed enough to take something like that on. And so I commend him for putting his efforts on something that is going to change the lives of a whole bunch of people in the state. And so we've always had a love-hate relationship. I love the guy, he's great, but I mean in terms of sometimes he's with us on some issues and sometimes he's not, and so, but we've always had a good personal relationship, and so I have a lot of respect for Senator Brandes and his work up in Tallahassee. We, as I indicated, the League of Cities, we spend an awful lot of our energy playing defense, which is mostly trying to fend off the preemptions where the legislature is trying to take power away from what we believe are the citizens, the ability of citizens to have a say in what's going on in their own local communities, whether it's tree trimming or cell phone tower placement or Uber and Lyft regulations or motorized scooters or things like that. There's always some preemption that the legislature thinks that a one-size-fits-all approach is the best, and we would say that sometimes that is the case, that sometimes there is a fit that works, that we can find common ground on and say, yes, there ought to be a comprehensive approach to dealing with the problem. Internet cafes, or there's some other things out there that we agree on. Water quality, we can agree that there ought to be minimum standards for pollution because pollution doesn't know boundaries. So things like that, there's clearly a statewide fix is the right solution, but in Florida's Constitution we have something called home rule, which is the ability of cities to basically have the input of their citizens and to run their cities in a way that they deem appropriate for their citizens, that are most responsive to their citizens. And so we spend an awful lot of time defending that home rule, and we also fight a lot on deal with what are called unfunded mandates, basically where the legislature thinks, hey, we have a great idea, and cities, you guys should pay for it. And so we fight that a lot in terms of making sure that if they're going to, if it's a great idea, then the state should be in on it too, and they should at least help fund it. And we've had some, actually with pension reform, we worked with Senator Brandes on that when we made some great progress in that, and they were partners with us. We got to the place where we were partners. So those are the things that the League of Cities is really genuinely or generally engaged in, are those two issues.
Those two big issues.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Well, so Senator Brandes, I want to circle back to something that you said as you answered my first question, which was you said at this point in the session, some things are dead. Would you mind explaining to our group what you meant by that and what the sort of the arc of the process is in terms of the timeline?
Sure. So, over 2,000 bills are filed generally every year. And, maybe 200 of them become law, somewhere between 150 and 200. On the high side, it might be 250. Most of them are very technical, ticky-tacky little things that don't affect people's lives on a day-to-day basis, or are very focused on one industry. And some of them are big, bold ideas that have a massive impact on our lives. And so we're at the point in session, though, where most of the things that have been proposed are not moving. Most members have only a handful of bills left to shepherd. And we're kind of dialing in as things have come through the top of the funnel and are now kind of funneling down to the point where people are looking to amend bills and try to get one or two final ideas through the process in the waning weeks.
I see. So I know that a good piece of tonight's whole evening was really to talk about how we communicate with our legislators. That's really what Dr. Oliver had in mind, was for us to learn how we communicate with the legislator. How do we frame our questions, our issues, our information, so that it will resonate with the legislator?
So that's the question. So, man, I think, yeah, sure. So first of all, there's 160 members of the Florida legislature, 120 members of the House, 40 members of the Senate. And let me say something controversial. Most of them don't matter. What matters is, what does the speaker want? What does the Senate president want? Where's the governor? And where are the key chairmen? I think you need to inform your local legislators of your key issues and things you care about. Obviously, if it's an appropriation, they're going to focus on that. But how do you convince the 3 or 4 people that are truly the decision makers in the process on your issue that this is the right issue? And then it really starts with, what is your vision and who is your champion? Do you have a cohesive vision put together? Have you selected the right champion to run your issue if it's something you're passionate about? This is a Republican-led legislature. Good. It helps if you have Republican sponsors. That's not mandatory, but it's definitely helps. What has happened with your issue in the past? And have you chosen a champion who's known for working their issues? Somebody who is actively participating in the process. The House only can file 6 bills. So are you going to chew up a bill slot in order to do this? And one of the things that I advise is, don't file a bill, drop it in as an amendment later on in the process if it's just a small fix. If it's nothing that needs to be radically rewritten. You're looking to change 4 words. Don't ask a member of the Florida legislature to file a bill for you. Ask for an amendment somewhere in the process in order to get that bill language through. I'm at the point in my career where I stopped caring whether my name is on the bill or not. I mean, I did that for the first few years, but for the last few years, I really just care about, can I get the language across the finish line? And that's a different perspective that you get with some patina in this process, is that you stop caring whether your name's on the bill. You're going to pass enough bills to hang on the wall, but can you get the language through the process? Can you get the governor to sign on to it? And oftentimes you have to understand that the governor is going to hold his cards close to the chest until the very end. Oftentimes, even if they tell you, even if the governor teams tells you that they're okay with it, I've seen bills get vetoed that they've told me they were fine with. So we're nothing is certain, but it really starts with, do I have a good vision, and do I have a good champion?
So I'm going to ask Mr. Dudley to sort of respond to that. I know you had some ideas that were generated as you listened to Senator Brandes. So
I always get ideas when Senator Brandes speaks. So it's interesting. He talked about the funnel, and I would say that we're in the time period. I'm happy that bills are dying, because most of them aren't in my benefit. So the idea that bills are dying, let's let them keep dying. Most of them are trying to strip powers away from citizens and trying to affect the operations and functions, or not most of them, but a lot of them are. And so the longer the delay, the better we are. I'm happy that it's only a 60-day session. I think that that's a really important piece of it. It's difficult to pass a piece of legislation. You have to have the same bill pass both chambers, and there's a lot of, the House sponsor may have one worldview on something, and the Senate sponsor, like Senator Branda says, you see stuff that it gets right up to the finish line, and all of a sudden it just collapses, and you say, what happened? And sometimes it's inexplicable what happened. Other times it's petty politics. Somebody made somebody mad, and so they just said, let's not take that bill up. So there's just a lot of dynamics that all of a sudden happen. As far as the amendatory process at the end, we probably have a little bit different worldview on that. I do agree with Senator Brandes when he talked about if it's a 3 or 4 word change, but sometimes a 3 or 4 word change can be a pretty substantial. If you're changing shall to may, or if you're changing a may to a shall, or 1 or 2 little words can be pretty impactful. And so it depends on what those words are that are being changed, of course. And I'm less of a fan. I've done it myself over my career, so I'm not going to be a hypocrite about it. I've waited till the last minute to file an amendment that takes care of what I need to get taken care of. But in reality, what that does is it does avoid the committee process and public input and a lot of that stuff that's necessary for really better policy making. I think that the more eyes that are on a piece of legislation, and the more you can work it through the committee process and get input from the stakeholders, that you're going to end up with a better piece of legislation, instead of just somebody crafting an amendment and they stick it in the middle of a 100-page rewrite that comes out on the last day of session, and nobody's had a chance to really look at it and vet it and kind of figure it all out. And I think probably Senator Brandes would largely agree with me on that.
Absolutely.
So, Senator Brandes, you said that there were about 2,000 bills filed, and we get down to about 200 that make it into law, that somehow or other get interpolated into the Florida statutes, right? Some of them are big, and some of them are just additions or amendments, right?
Tiny.
Yeah.
3 words.
But let me ask you, if somebody has a big idea, it doesn't sound like a big idea is going to pass the first time it comes before the legislature. Have you seen someone bring a brand new idea and then have it be embraced that session?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, look, it took us 4 years to pass the bill that allowed Uber and Lyft to operate in Florida. But, I've worked on plenty of legislation where it was the first idea, first year, specifically like, flood insurance was a great one for me, that we got through, and creating a private flood insurance program in Florida. That was a big idea first year and got it through. So, oftentimes you're going to come back and tweak those ideas in the back end, but there are some ideas that are perpetual. I mean, we've seen, some bills get filed every year, and they've filed every year for the last 15 years. Vacation rentals, alimony reform. I mean, presidential searches for universities have been filed for 8 years, and I filed it for the last 3.
Yeah. So I think we're about to have our third panel member join us. Am I correct, Sam? All righty. So let me go ahead and introduce you to our third panelist this evening, because actually she's the person I want to ask the next question of. So timing is everything. So this is Michelle Grimsley, and Michelle is a third-generation Manatee County native. She's got a strong family foundation and deep ties to Manatee County community, and she recently served as legislative staff in the Florida House of Representatives, covering 4 counties. She's uniquely poised to serve the needs of clients today as part of the Southern Group. Is that correct? Clients in Hillsborough, Pinellas, Sarasota, and Manatee counties, and you're a partner in the Southern Group. Is that correct?
Correct.
All righty. So can I take a step back and ask you how you came to government to begin with, and then I'm going to ask you my big question.
Of course. Pardon my tardiness. Coming from Manatee County, I came across 2 bridges, so traffic wasn't friendly to me today, so I apologize. But I started, I don't like politics, believe it or not, but I am very active in my community. And so I met former State Representative Wingate Newton at community events, and I would see him all of the time. And the position of legislative aide came open in his office, and he said, I've seen how you deal with people in the community and how you work with people and problem solve, and I think you would be a good fit for legislative aide. Would you be interested? And I took a deep breath and a pause, and I did a little research, and I thought about it, and I said, you know what, I think I would like to try it. So that's how I got involved in this process to begin with.
And was he right?
He was right. I loved it. I didn't think I would, but the moment the first day I walked into the Florida Capitol, I was blown away. Things aren't as though you see them on television or in the media. So to really get to see how things are done behind the scenes and how laws are really made, it was a very interesting process to be a part of.
Great. So my big question for you, because this group of people is here tonight interested in bettering their own advocacy of their own issues, right? So what do you advise people to do?
So my advice around advocacy is usually to, one, know exactly what it is that you're advocating for inside and out. Be very specific with the points that you are making when you're going to visit legislative staff or the legislators. Time is of the essence. Because we can be so passionate about the topics that we are advocating on, we can get lost in the wind and in the rhetoric of it all. But we need to make sure that we always have a leave behind, but don't read the bullet points that you have on the leave behind to them during your meeting. Have a couple of things that you really want to get across to the legislator or the staff member that you're speaking to, and really hone in on those points. And I think that is the most effective way to advocate when you are meeting with staff and legislators.
So in that is be prepared, right?
Definitely.
And that includes some print piece that supports what you're going to say.
Absolutely. What I can tell you, when I was an aide, we would have binders made up for our members. So if you gave us a leave behind, we would highlight certain things. So if they're on the floor and they need to go back to something that was said in that meeting, or if a bill is coming up that's relevant to your the point that you're advocating on, they always have that to go back to. It's hard to sometimes they meet 50 people in a week, so it could be difficult for them to just pull back from what it is that you spoke to them about in your meeting. Not to say that they don't care, it's just a lot going on. So having that leave behind is really, really always a good idea.
Great. So I want to ask Mr. Dudley if he will just comment on that as well.
I agree actually a lot with what Michelle said, and so I have a saying that anyone that's ever been around me in politics knows that I say this, is that in real estate it's location, 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 and in politics it's relationships, 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 and that means that you are trying to build relationships with whether it's your city commission, your county commission, your state senator, your congressperson, that you're building those relationships. You're going to them not just when you need something. You're going to them, you're letting them know when they did a good job. You're letting them know when you don't agree with their vote. You are a solid source of information. You never are misleading them at all. The best way to make sure that you don't ever get another appointment with a decision maker is to make sure that you mislead them. If you do that, you might as well just hang up your cleats right then, because it's not going to happen anymore, and rightfully so. They're counting on you. They're not experts on every topic. They can't be. There's thousands of bills that are filed, so they're relying on you to give them good, solid information, and it better be right. There may be another view on it, and that's okay. You're advocating for your clients, but it's always also good to say, hey, the other side is going to say this, and this is what our response to that would be. So trying to make sure, so face-to-face, regular contact, basically listening to the other side of the issue. Sometimes by listening, you realize that, okay, they're making a really good point on that, and maybe we need to yield a little bit on that, and is that a hill that we're going to die on that particular issue, that piece, if that's really important to them, and the more I hear it, it's less important to my client, like, okay, let's yield on that, and let's let them prevail on that piece of it. Maybe they'll give us something in return for that. It's negotiating, trading, being very specific, communicating respectfully, making sure, as I said, Senator Brandes and I we've had lots of things that we don't agree on, but we've had a lot of things that we do agree on, and we've always been respectful to each other in terms of having that dialogue. It's never personal. So you have to play the long game. You don't want to make it, whether it's at the local level, the state level, the federal level, you don't want to demonize anybody. You don't want to make anybody the enemy. They're not the enemy. They have a different worldview than you do. They have a different approach to it. They have a different solution. You just have to give them the benefit of that and be able to have a discussion about it. And finally, I would say being solution-oriented, just saying no is not a really helpful dialogue if you're just going in and saying, no, we just don't want that. So you have to be willing to say, all right, well, where are you? If you've ever tried to negotiate with a 5-year-old and it's just no, 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 it's fruitless pretty fast. And so, you try to get into that place where, okay, well, what can you live with? And that's really I would say the top 8 or 10 things that when I'm talking to folks about being a successful advocate, those are the points that I would like to really focus on, have them focus on.
All right, great. Senator Brandes, do you want to give us that advice on what's the best approach in these kinds of advocacy situations?
So I would say play to the member's preference. Don't go advocate for them for something that you know that they're already against. So if you can find a way to play to their preference with your ask, I think that's really helpful. On appropriation stuff, that they're going to want to help. They're going to, everybody they're going to kind of silo a certain amount of money in their mind off of what's possible. Generally asking for more than $1 million. If it's a county or city issue, it's going to be tough for them to get, because kind of like the tall poppy, it gets chopped off at $1 million, and sometimes they can fund 3 or 4 projects and make 3 or 4 people happy with $250,000 to $300,000 versus one project with $1 million because I've only got so much money. So be careful what you ask for. 2, if it's a public policy issue and you're coming to advocate on policy, some members will take the lead behinds and some of them, look, I have meetings every 15 minutes and my office is constantly stacked up with papers that largely go unread because I can't spend all day reading papers because I got another meeting in 5 minutes. So it really depends. But I think the most effective advocacy, I think Scott's advice is correct, right? Build a relationship, build it early, keep coming back to it, and recognize that many of these members are going to be there for 8 years. And to the extent that you can become a trusted source for them, because to Scott's point again, we don't know it all. Most of these members, look, I've learned a handful of topics and I know them pretty well, but most members come in and they are not a jack of all trades. And most members, are an inch deep and a mile wide on most areas of public policy. Some of the counsel I generally give to members is, for the first few years, take on one issue and learn it better than everybody else, and then move on to the second one. So maybe by the time you have 8 years in, you have 2, and you're starting on your 3rd issue that you understand deeply. But again, most members are an inch deep and a mile wide. They aren't steeped in any one area of public policy over another. If it helps if you can find somebody who's on the committee, right? If you can find the chair of the committee to sponsor your bill, or you can find somebody who is, has most favored trading status, nation status, in the legislature to champion your bill, that's a great find.
Thank you. So, Ms. Grimsley, yes.
Something on that. So, Senator Brandes is dead on. He talked about in terms of at the beginning of his comments in terms of getting the right advocate. So really, really important. You don't want to go to somebody if somebody's they filed bills against you. You owe them the courtesy of saying, hey, we got this issue. You kind of have to do the swing by and make sure that you've talked to anybody. You don't want to ignore anybody. But the other associated with that is personalizing when you're going to have that discussion of not just saying, oh, the sky is going to fall, this is a bad bill. Well, why is it bad? Well, because it's bad. That's not really a helpful answer. And so trying to have specific answers and to the point of what Senator Brandes was saying about, playing to your audience, making sure, hey, if you do this in our city, we're going to lose 27 jobs as a result of this piece of legislation if you do X, Y, Z, and be able to back that up and have specifics and make it personal. All politics is not only local, but it's also very personal and very specific, and the more specific and personal you can make it, and I don't mean personal like in a negative way, but making it personal where it touches real people, and that you're making sure that the legislator, the decision maker, understands what those impacts are.
Got it. So, Ms. Grimsley, what do you think the relationship and partnership should be between state government and local governments in decision making? So we've got this home rule question that is just hanging over all of us every day in Florida. What do you think is the right solution to that?
So home rule is definitely needed. When we're at home, we understand what it is that we need on a daily basis. But the relationship, I think, needs to be understood, because on the state level, you're getting a bird's eye view of what's happening from Panhandle down to South Florida. And sometimes you have to make the tough decisions that are necessary, but they may affect a county or a city who's not having that specific issue. So it's nothing against that county or that city, but the state might need to step in and do something for the greater good of our state. But I do believe that it sometimes is misunderstood that at the state level, home rule isn't wanted or it's not liked, and I don't believe that that's true. I just think that sometimes tough love has to come into play, and I would even use the analogy of a parent, and sometimes parents have to step in and, lay down the law, even if the child may not agree, but in the long run, it's for the greater good. So it's a very, very, it can be a gray area, but you just have to, I really believe it's issue-based, and you have to take issue by issue when it comes to that specific relationship.
So we've got 67 counties and over 400 municipal corporations or governmental subparts, right? So that's a tricky calculus to do. What will work, what needs to be uniform, what needs to be personalized, right?
Precisely.
All right. Well, I think I'm going to just sort of make the switch right here, because we've got some questions from our participants. And so it takes two of us to replace Kim Jackson. So I'm going to introduce at this moment, I'm going to slip off the stage and introduce my boss, who is our Vice President of Academic Affairs, Matthew Leo Troth, who's got the magic iPad with the audience questions. So Dr. Leo Troth, you want to join our group up here?
Agreed on some stuff and we've disagreed on some stuff, and I'd like to hear sort of your worldview on home rule and sort of how that plays in. It shifted over the years in terms of, it seems more and more that their legislature is making decisions that we believe should be made at the local level. But I'm just curious about, we've had good discussions about a lot of issues, whether it's scooters and Uber, Lyft, and
Sorry, I can hear you. Yeah. So look, I think there's a lot of issues that make sense to be that make sense to be made at the local level, and my preference is that we're doing things at the local level. I think the challenge is when you get pushback on, there are some issues that just can't be done at the local level. Uber and Lyft would never have been done at the local level. Scooters, when people cross county lines, it's hard to say scooters and e-bikes can't operate across county lines, or there's different rules for them across county lines. But we have, but sometimes just crazy things come up. Like I have a beach in my community that doesn't want to allow umbrellas on their beach because they don't want tourists putting up umbrellas on what is largely a residential beach community. So they have things like don't allow umbrellas. Other issues that typically come up that are kind of ticky-tacky. Obviously, we saw the plastic straw bill, and we always have the plastic bag bill, and we have the, so there's just countless little issues. And sometimes somebody gets a burr in their saddle. For example, Senator Bradley got a burr in his saddle over allowing people to grow vegetables in their front yard. So you just never know the quirky, funny things that are going to come through versus the things that are real issues that are really important, like fertilizer and things of that nature that we need to have a conversation about. But my strong preference is to allow cities and localities, and I think I've gotten more stronger on that preference since the longer I've been in the legislature. But so many of these ideas are really about who's in the chair, right? Where is the Senate president? Where is the speaker on this? And are they going to, what's their overall philosophy on that? And I think it's important that cities and counties continue to educate the top speakers and Senate presidents as to why it's important for home rule. And the earlier they do that in the process, the more effective it's going to be.
Thank you very much, Senator. Michelle, I wanted to ask you a question that came in, and it's, I'm going to paraphrase it a little bit. How can grassroots groups compete with well-funded advocacy groups in getting in front of legislators and getting in the ears of legislators and having an impact on policy? And Scott, I'm going to come back to you on this as well.
So I think that the grassroots organizations start with planning. Don't plan to go to Tallahassee 2 weeks before session starts and think that you're going to be effective and you're going to get your issue across the finish line. You need to start planning for next session now. You can get a meeting with legislators even if you're not a large organization. But Senator Brandes mentioned something earlier. Looking at your committees and whatever committee stops the bill or the appropriation project that you're advocating for, make sure you know those things because you want to use your time wisely. Don't just meet with legislators that are on the opposite side of your issue because you want to change their mind. Meet with those that are on the committees that are going to hear bills that are related to your specific issue and talk to them about why you're there. You don't want to go in negative Nancy and just saying, this is why you need to vote this way, and it's because this is hurting Mr. Dudley made a point earlier about providing solutions. You want to be able to give the legislator something to think about. Trust me, emails come in and calls don't stop coming for no's. And they know that a group of people are going to be against a specific issue. But if you can provide them with a solution to that specific issue that you might be advocating for, you definitely will start to build that relationship and just have an understanding of the process. So if your issue doesn't make it across the finish line the first year, you just need to make sure that you're still building relationships, you're still gaining knowledge and doing research on whatever it is that you're advocating for, and know that you're in it for the long run. It's not a short game that you're playing.
Thank you very much. That's a very comprehensive answer. Scott, you worked for a couple of different advocacy groups. So looking across those, where do you think the grassroots versus the more established organizations differ and can have an impact?
Well, thanks. And Michelle, that's a great answer that you gave. I agree with everything you said. There's an author, Joel Blackwell, and he said something about, he wrote a book called, it's how the average citizen can get what he wants from government or something. I don't remember the exact title. Sorry, Mr. Blackwell. But the gist, in his book, he writes that if you don't tell your elected officials what to do, you leave them free to do whatever it is that somebody else is telling them to do. If you're not weighing in on it, then you give your legislator the out of saying, well, I didn't hear from you. I didn't know that was an issue for you. So that's sort of the first part of grassroots, is making sure that you're that you're going to the legislators with an educated worldview about something, and that you are doing that outreach to the legislator. And Michelle, and we've all talked about building those relationships, and that it's a long-term relationship. You're walking precincts, you're having coffee, you're doing whatever it is you do. You're not just showing up. I can't believe I'm about to give relationship advice, because most of my girlfriends would say that's a bad idea. That you don't want to be the person that only calls when you need something. You want to be there for them when they also need something. And so it has to be a two-way street. And so from a grassroots perspective, I think that that's part of it, is making sure that you're plugged in, you're helping out where you can, you're not just being the negative Nancy, as you said. I think that one of the other key things that what I hear a lot, I'm now director of field advocacy, and that's basically building grassroots organizations. I did it for 8 years for Kodak and Fuji across all around the country, building grassroots organizations. And what I learned is that the average citizen is really busy. They have a lot going on, and they're plugged into the one or two issues that are being covered in the paper, and that's not a knock on the media. There's thousands. You've heard Senator Brandes talk about thousands of issues filed at the beginning, thousands of bills filed. Only a few make it through the funnel. Only a few are really like sexy issues, whether it's the abortion fight or the, whatever the headline kind of issue is. So a lot of the average citizens are not really even aware until after something has happened that it's going on. And so what I encourage people to do is, plug in, watch the Florida channel. It's directly, you're watching what's going on. There's no news slant to that at all. You are watching the committee meeting in process. There are calendars available. There's just a whole bunch of information available. We started a program called Local Voices United that basically tries to give people information where if it's going to affect a citizen or your neighborhood or a city, we have a list of bills that are in that category. We make it really easy for people to push a button, send an email, make a phone call to their legislator, really try to make it really simple. But the key is you have to educate them first on what's going on across the spectrum. You have to engage them, and you have to engage them wisely. You don't want to just set go storm Tallahassee. That's the wrong approach. You have to have them marching in unison and have a unified message and bringing solutions, as Michelle talked about, Senator Brandes has talked about. So it's all those things. And I really do believe, if I didn't believe that grassroots worked, I'd have quit my job a long time ago, because the League of Cities, we don't donate money. We count on the strength of our elected officials to make those phone calls, to reach out to their legislators, to tell the personal story, to do all those things that I've talked about, to bring their message. And that's grassroots. It's not AstroTurf. It's not it's not just corporate grassroots. It's actually real grassroots, where people that really care about an issue are engaged. And that's really that's what grassroots really is getting people that otherwise wouldn't be engaged. You're getting them engaged, and that's what real grassroots is. And so making that happen by educating them and engaging them, and sometimes enraging them, letting them really know, hey, they're really doing you wrong up there, and you need to get fired up about it. So that's the approach that we're taking.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I think that's a good understanding of it all. Senator, I'm going to put you on the spot. Thinking through your experience, are there advocacy groups that did really well that you weren't expecting to do well across your term, across the legislative bodies? And thinking the differences in grassroots and maybe more established organizations, maybe a grassroots organization that just, you didn't think that, that they seemed a little bit too small, a little too niche, but they actually figured it out over the last decade and did something pretty impactful.
I mean, we can take a bill that was up just last week. There was a bill on the Everglades that was up, and the fishermen from the Everglades came up, and I thought they had an incredible impact on the process, and an incredible impact, obviously, on the governor, because the governor was watching and his team was watching too. And so, you had dozens of, captains that, are from the Everglades or surrounding areas that were talking about one piece of policy that had to deal with the water level of the Everglades and how important that was. So I think, they can have a huge impact. I think, most organizations that I've seen up here have ebb and flow of their impact. The realtors at one point were really strong. They're not as strong so much right now. Property insurers haven't been strong for years. The trial bar is incredibly strong, almost too strong. Like they've infected us like COVID. There are groups that ebb and flow in this process, and there are some that are perennially extremely strong. Right, the trial bar, for example, figured out why should we support members when we can become them, and have put a number of people in office who are former trial bar presidents or members of the bar of the trial bar. So you have groups all over the place on a lot of these issues, and the real question is what's the strength of their relationships? To Scott's point, who do they have? Do they have good relationships with key members? And then if you're a city or county, you don't have to just rely on your existing member. You can have a relationship with members that are outside your area. Now, it helps if they're near your area, but maybe your member is out of favor or not very strong or in the wrong party to carry this issue, or just has a preference against the issue. There's nothing that says you can't go advocate to another member of the legislature, even if they don't directly represent your county or your city. So use all the tools available, and then and then really just kind of focus in on making sure they deeply understand your issue, which means this isn't a touch and go. This is, we're going to educate you, and then we're going to educate you again, and then we're going to come back again. And, and you kind of must be present to win. So come up to Tallahassee, spend time with them, take them to lunch, buy them a cup of coffee, or if you can, or go have dinner with them, and try to make sure that they understand how important their issue is to you. But again, most issues aren't new. Most issues have been around for a long time, or we're consistently retreading them. Many of these members don't actually control the policy issue that you care about. It's that you're trying to amend some other bill, or you're trying to kill some other piece of legislation. But it's really the relationship, and the earlier you can build it in their career, the longer and more valuable it's going to be.
Thank you very much. Yeah, go ahead, Michelle.
I would just like to remind advocacy groups that legislators don't live in Tallahassee year-round. Meet with them at home. Mm-hmm. At home, you're going to definitely get more time than you are in Tallahassee. And right. Meeting with them at home, you can meet with them more regularly. So always keep in mind that you don't have to wait until they go to Tallahassee to meet with them.
I have to agree with that, and I'm sure Senator Brandes, he's talking about 15-minute increments. You're lucky if you get a full 15 minutes, because meetings usually run over, and so you have to be able to take your issue. There's the elevator speech version of what and sometimes that's all you've got is from the first floor to the fourth floor, or vice versa. So you better be dialed in and know what your message is and what your ask is, and making sure that. And I think that's the rest of the story, is making sure that you're clear in what your ask is. I walk out of meetings sometimes with some of my members, and they go, "That was a great meeting." I'm like, "Really? So what's his position?" Well, he said good things. I'm like, yeah, but he never said he was voting for us. So making that ask, and making sure that you know how to make that ask, and understanding, get to the heart of the matter. They're busy. They're really busy, legislators. And to Michelle's point, meeting in the district when they're not in session, that's the time to be building those relationships, not during the legislative session. We just had our legislative action days. We had 300 of our city officials up there for 2 days. It was effective. It was good flying of the flag. But if they're counting on that to be the most effective part of our advocacy efforts, we're in real trouble. And fortunately, we're not counting on that to be. It's to make sure that folks know that we're there, we're paying attention and all that stuff. So there's certainly a purpose to it, but we're trying to build those relationships year-round.
Yeah, it definitely sounds from all three of you that authenticity, being the real people to be talking about the issues, as well as persistence, not just during a short term or a long term, but that year-round attention to the detail is really what's driving a lot of this. One of the things that sometimes comes up is we have legislators representing us. We have, and again, I'm summarizing a little bit. We have advocacy groups advocating for our positions as citizens. And I'm a voter. I'm not a legislator. I'm not an advocate or anything. And one of the things sometimes between these kind of two broad groups is sometimes you all are so prepared to talk. What is the question you wish that a legislator would ask you, or what is a question you wish an advocate would ask you before they start pitching an idea or before they start talking with you about something? And Michelle, would you like to go first? Oh, Michelle, would you like to go first, or sorry?
Well, Senator Brandes was starting.
Well, so I think it's important that legislators understand your broader vision, right? What problem are we trying to solve, right? What is the larger strategy? My big takeaway from Tallahassee after doing this for over a decade is that in Tallahassee, everything is tactical and not much is strategic. We come in every 2 years, you're going to get a different Senate president, different speaker. They're going to have different philosophies, even if they're both Republicans. We can see radically different styles of Republicans amongst the speaker, Senate president, every couple of years. That the whole philosophy, frankly, may change because these guys' true norths are not always the same. And so what is the big picture issue that we're trying to solve? And then what's our tactical way that we're trying to solve it? So often legislation is a game of first downs, right? We have a goal. It's a long-term goal. Look, we've had a goal in education for years in Florida to provide kids more choice and more options. And every year we chip away at trying to do that. We don't get there every year. It's a game of first downs. Sometimes they throw a Hail Mary and it gets caught, and sometimes it gets fumbled. But it's a game of first downs. And if you're talking about a massive area of public policy, for example, affordable housing, what is the strategy for the state and affordable housing? I'll tell you, there isn't one, right? We follow basically the same strategy that was put in decades ago on affordable housing. What is the big crisis right now in most of the areas of Florida? Affordable housing. We have $0 that we spend on basic research in affordable housing. We have $0 that we spend in basic research on property insurance. $0 that we spend on basic research in criminal justice. $0 we spend in basic research on healthcare, right? There isn't a larger strategy to most of the plans. Lots of things just happen here that are all little tactical moves, and they may be in the wrong direction. Just to tell a quick story is, Zig Ziglar used to tell this story about an army troop or a troop of people that were traveling through a jungle, and they were cutting down the vines, and they were a month into the journey, and finally somebody decides to climb the tree. And the guy at the bottom of the tree says, "What do you see up there?" And the guy at the top of the tree says, "Wrong jungle." And the guy at the bottom of the tree says, "Shut up, we're making progress." Now, that is the perfect analogy for oftentimes how Tallahassee works, because oftentimes they don't want to know that what's on top of the tree. They don't ask the question about, are we even in the right jungle? Because in a bunch of areas, we're in the wrong jungle. And when we tell them they're in the wrong jungle, the answer is, "Shut up, we're making progress." So, usually the issues that city leaders, county leaders bring me are littler issues that we can resolve pretty quickly, or we just are just going to disagree. But effective advocacy really is build a relationship, find your legislative champion, make sure they understand your vision, and tell them why they're in the right jungle.
Thank you, Senator. Michelle, what question do you want a legislator to ask you?
I think I would want a legislator to ask me if they couldn't make what I'm advocating for happen, what are some smaller things that we can do to get you where you want to go? How can we break this down into bite-sized chunks instead of just looking at the big pie? I think that question is good for both the legislator and the advocate. If the advocate hasn't already thought about those things, it gets you to think about, maybe it's easier for me to chip away at my issue rather than just being upset that it hasn't been solved in one fell swoop. So that's what I think I'd like for the legislator to ask.
helping each other think through the problem. Again,
Yes.
looking at that strategy and the tactics you're using on the strategy.
Yes, and then that would also show the advocate that they're listening and they care, and then you're creating dialogue. It's not just yes or no questions and answers. So
Nice, thank you.
I
Scott?
think that's a brilliant answer. I agree wholeheartedly. Sometimes you get in it. Senator Brandes told the story of the jungle and wading through the jungle, and a lot of times the strategy in Tallahassee is if you want a pony, you ask for Secretariat, and you know that it's going to get whittled down, and so that question, what Michelle just said, in terms of, all right, well, how can you want this? I want this. How can we figure out a way? And one of the things at the League of Cities we do, somebody offers a preemption, they want to preempt us from doing something, and we say, well, what is the problem you're trying to solve? And maybe we can help you get there. Like, if we know what your problem is, then we can actually maybe work together on this. And it would be great if more legislators, we fail to ask it sometimes too, but some legislators fail to ask it. So I think asking that, what can we figure out that we can eat in bite-sized pieces? I think that was a brilliant answer, Michelle.
All right. Thank you very much. I do want to thank our panelists. I've allowed this discussion to go on a little long. I'm sorry, I'm an academic, so I will talk forever about anything and argue any position, irrespective of what I actually believe, because that's what college professors do. But I do want to be mindful of the time, and so we're going to wrap up the session a little bit, but people will be around if you want to grab someone, talk with Michelle, talk with Scott. Wave to Senator Brandes on the monitors above and below. But I also want to share with everyone that the Institute for Strategic Policy Solutions, which is not left, not right, trying to get us all there together, it has the next event, and I think we have a slide for our next event that I'm going to plug a little bit, talking about sea level rise in Florida. It's a virtual event on February 16th. That's actually this Friday, I believe, and we'll be talking about what are the impacts?
Today's February 16th.
16th, it's the 18th. I'm pretty sure it's this Friday. I know it's on my, let me double check.
Is that what we're talking about next?
Yeah, we're not talking about this today. It is on Friday at 1 o'clock. My apologies. So the link should be good. Go to the ISPS website, but we will be talking about sea level rise in Florida and some of the impacts on property, some of the impacts on aquaculture, some of the impacts on the economy of Florida, municipalities in Florida. But with that, want to thank everyone for coming out this evening. Do a quick plug to follow ISPS on social media so you know what we're going to be talking about next and what we're bringing together to our communities on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, website, more and more social media that we keep on adding. So let us know where you see us and what you want to hear, and we appreciate your feedback. Finally, I want to mention that there's a recorded version of this forum will be posted with closed captioning on our website and on YouTube. And we want to thank Duke Energy for being the anchor sponsor for the event this evening. So thank you, Duke Energy, for letting us talk about advocacy in Tallahassee, how we get things done in Florida, how we sometimes go slow and how we sometimes go fast. But thank you all for coming out this evening. And thank you, our panelists.